Hello and welcome to Catamount Community Connection, your weekly public affairs program here on Catamount Radio. I'm Brian Collamore, the host of the 1 Hour Show, and we talk each week with business, professional, nonprofit, and political figures. Our program is brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And again, on behalf of everyone that has anything to do with the Rutland County Agricultural Society, thank you for attending this year's fair. It was an incredible fair, 178 years, and the attendance was way up this year. I know there's people that, for whatever reason, may not have been attending in the past, let's say, half dozen years, but it seems like everybody turned out this year. So the fair was great, and we're already looking forward to the fair next August. So, again, thank you very much to everybody who was part of the fair and everybody who attended. So our guest today, Devon Neary, the Executive Director of the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. And we haven't had you on for, I don't know, it's been probably 6-7 weeks, something like that, maybe?
Yeah, probably. We cooled down after the session. It was so intense that we needed a little break, but I'm happy to be back. Thank you, Brian.
So we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about, and you told me that we got some good news this week, and we'll talk about that and then whatever else is going on with the Planning Commission.
You bet, yeah. Why don't I start off? You're hearing
Let's start off with the good news.
Hot off the press here. We received notice yesterday that we were awarded $1.25 million from the U.S. Department of Labor for workforce development from the Workforce Opportunities for Rural Communities grant, which is a mouthful, but that is administered through the Northern Borders Regional Commission area. So we were the only recipient in the state of Vermont, which was great.
Yeah.
This funding is going to directly support workforce development in the Rutland region, and it's going to be in cooperation with the Rutland Region Workforce Investment Board. The WIB, as we call it, went defunct several years ago. The Regional Planning Commission picked it up and dusted it off, and then COVID happened, so we've been sort of slowly rebuilding it. And this year we said, hey, this is the year. We've got the board back together. We have some great board members representing the Department of Labor, Community College of Vermont, Rutland Regional Medical Center, and several other really great partners there. So we identified this opportunity. The Work 6 program, as it's called, through the U.S. Department of Labor was granting up to $1.5 million. So we did request the full 1.5. We were bumped down a little bit to the 1.25 so they could spread it around far enough. But ultimately what this is a direct partnership with employers in the Rutland region. And we have some early letters of commitment from like Casella, Naylor and Breen, the city of Rutland, and several other trades, employers and groups. And what we're hoping to do is essentially pay for the salaries of high school seniors, folks who may not have graduated high school, or new Americans coming to Rutland region, to have them have an in-depth training and then internship employment with this employer. So no risk on the employer to bring somebody on and try them out, but the huge reward that maybe it could work out in a permanent employee. And setting up these students and participants for success is absolutely critical. As you know, we're looking at real issues in Rutland County around youth retention, workforce retention and development, and the trades. So we're hoping that this will address several pressing challenges in the region, such as our housing deficiency, which we can correlate directly to a lack of developers and contractors. So if we can build our contractor workforce, we're hoping that will maybe result in more housing. The other one is population growth. As you know, we've seen stagnation across most of our communities in the region, with a slight decline in Rutland City and some of our bigger areas. And the cost of living, especially in our rural communities, has only gone up. So we really need more population to reduce the tax burden, and increase tax revenue for the towns as well. So we're hoping that through this program, we'll retain young folks. As you know, we're rewriting the regional plan right now, and we just analyzed some census data that says, more than 20,000 people are leaving Rutland County each year, but only 19,000, or sorry, not each year, sorry, since the last census, so 2010 to 2020, about 20,000 people left the region, and only about 19,000 came into the region. So not a huge loss, but a net loss. But if you dive deep into who's leaving, it's younger folks, and it's lower income younger folks. So if we can get these folks trained in jobs, I'm hoping we're going to be able to retain them. And then lastly, and most simply, but critically as well, we have a workforce shortage problem here. A lot of our big employers we've met with and talked with, they're all struggling to fill positions. And a lot of times they're good paying jobs. So we're hoping that, again, this is a way to bring those people back into the workforce and retain them as Rutland County residents.
So is there an age guideline for the positions that you're going to try to put people into? As
of now, no. And, when we get the funding, we just got the announcement, there may be tweaks to the format and the criteria. But as of now, I think we want to keep it as open, as flexible as possible, with a ramp-up period where this first year is really going to be a bit of a pilot, and those next 2 years more and more, with the hope of, I think in our original grant application for the full award, we were looking at 160 to 200 participants, which would be a lot of workers to stay in the region. So more to come. I'm excited about it. The WIB has real potential to do something great in bringing everybody together, because a lot of people are doing this work. Yep. But it can be a bit siloed, and if we can just combine our forces, I think we're going to be in really good shape. And I'm excited about the partnerships. Stafford Technical Center is a really important key partner in this, and they're an important member of our WIB board as well. So, like I said, more to come, but I'm really excited about this huge opportunity for the region. Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of the employees or employers, Casella, which of course operates beside the waste management half of the business. They do have a construction company, right? And we are looking for people to get into that business because we need developers. Naylor and Breen's another one that does construction. So I can see where this would $1.25 million. It sounds like a lot of money, but I'm sure it'll be dispersed, over as you mentioned, a couple hundred jobs. So, maybe if this works, we can continue to make application for some grants down the road. That's absolutely it, Brian. We want to try this. We want it to work. We want to learn from it. But ultimately, 3 years of funding is not going to do it. We need sustainable long-term funding, whether that comes in the form of partnerships and sponsors with businesses, something a little bit more sustainable, or another edition of this grant funding. Who knows? But, we're going to explore all options. Yeah. It's needed. Was it a lot of people that put together the grant application, or was it a single person? Can we give some kudos to people? We can absolutely give kudos. I'm glad you brought that up. One of our newest planners, actually, Gregory Pelker, put this application together. He got a lot of good support from the Department of Labor and Stafford and several folks locally that reviewed and commented on it. But ultimately, that young man worked like a dog and did it himself, and with a really favorable outcome. So congrats to Greg. We're really lucky to have such a talented staff at the RPC and try to leverage those resources in all our program areas. So if I'm a late teen, early 20s person and I'm interested in this, how would I go about sort of applying to get some of the training? Yeah, so they'll be notified through their schools when that time comes. I think there will be a pretty quick ramp up period this winter and this fall into winter, with the bulk of the cohort coming next year. I think this cohort will be quite small to sort of test it out and see how it goes. But ultimately, those high school seniors and potential high school students will want to speak to their guidance counselors, and will have plenty of information and marketing, within those schools.
And it doesn't take, a genius to figure out we need those folks. I mean, if you walk up and down Merchants Row, Center Street, anywhere in Rutland County, you will no doubt see signs all over the place. Help wanted,
Absolutely.
Looking for this, so there's plenty of jobs available, and we need the workforce.
We do. And, hearing the statewide labor statistics, it paints a pretty tough picture across the state, but I think Rutland County's biggest asset is its people. I think they're hardworking. They believe in Rutland County, and there's a bit of, grit and resilience to us that I think is ripe historically, has been hugely productive. And I think we can get back to that,
One of the main tenets, if you will, of the current administration in Montpelier has been all along, the workforce is what we need to concentrate on. We have a population base that has been eroding slowly but surely. Now, you mentioned Rutland County is down about 10,000, no, not 10,000.
1,000.
1,000
Yep.
people over the last decade. The state itself, even though every now and then you'll hear reports of population moving into the area. We had some folks that, I don't know if you want to call them COVID refugees or whatever, but they were dying to get out of the big urban areas and move up here. So we have had a little bit of, interest in moving to Vermont. But I think overall we're still, and maybe some of those people are older and they're not necessarily still in their years where they're going to be working a lot. So we still need some workforce folks. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Vermont Futures Project is a really interesting sort of pursuit of this issue, looking to encourage the population to grow to 802,000, over the next decade. When we looked at those census statistics, what was really interesting is we did have growth in Rutland County during that period, but it was very much concentrated around recreational areas. So Wells, Vermont, near Lake St. Catharines, saw a big boom. Killington, Vermont, saw the biggest increase. So over that period of time, they increased their population by 78%. That's wild to me. That is, almost doubling their population overnight. So, well, not overnight, over a decade, but most of that came, through COVID. And what I'm excited about is the Otter Creek Communications District. They received a grant to build out broadband internet throughout the region this summer. Probably a lot of towns and a lot of listeners have seen trucks with big wire harnesses on the back stringing lines. That's broadband internet that was paid for by grant dollars to get installed. I think we could see a second wave of migration remote workers that couldn't before work in a rural area because there was very poor substandard internet access, and now we have world-class internet speeds of 100 over 100. So it's really exciting there too. That was a big push by the governor in the state of Vermont to get those dollars out to towns, and through these communications districts, it's working. It's working really well. And they're talking about Rutland region. Most of it will be built out by the end of this year, which, to think 3 years ago, we had very little broadband other than VTEL in the southern part of the county. So,
and these are what are known as CUDs, I think, the Communication Union Districts. And I happen to be part of the Government Operations Committee when we figured it out. And it was late in the session. Senator McDonald came in from Orange County and he said, hey, we've got a shot at doing this. Can you guys move quickly enough to get it started? And we did. And the first one I was involved with was Pitts Field. And they had like this little ceremony when the thing was finally set up and running. And people were ecstatic because they had never been able to use that function before. So
yeah, nowadays it's a real quality of life issue, and it's an equity issue as well, because it's usually the ruralest, most poor areas of our region that go without. So we're hoping this is just the beginning of more good things around connectivity and telecommunications of the region. We got to work on cell phone coverage and emergency response radio networks. Those are still not great everywhere, but we'll continue to work on it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to the fellow you mentioned from your group and the $1.25 million that's headed our way from the federal government. That'll be great. I know you've been working hard on the plan. I'll just call it the plan.
Yes.
Are you finished? Where are we with that?
Yeah, great question. Not finished. We got another close to 2 years left on the development of this plan. The hope and need is to adopt the plan by June of 2026. So we just finished our first rough draft, which is exciting to see it in full form. Our regional plan committee through our board of commissioners is going to be reviewing that, editing it, commenting on it, and we'll be sending that back to our authors to take another crack at another revision, with the hope that 2 more revisions and we've got it right. So right now, what we're about to be launching Monday, actually, of next week. Well, this might air after that. So this will be this coming Sunday. So tomorrow. Perfect. Tomorrow. So tomorrow, folks, you'll see some press releases, front porch forum posts, Facebook posts, town newsletter. We're going to try to hit everybody as hard as we can to notify them that we are now entering our second phase of public engagement for the regional plan. So for those who don't know, just like all town plans, a regional plan guides growth and development and conservation in the region. It's to be updated every 8 years. We are currently under a plan that was adopted in 2018, so it'll expire in 2026. The first phase, we were really looking to learn and assess and get as much information about the priorities of the region as we could. We had 1,500 responses to our public survey. We held 27 pop-up events. We visited all 27 towns. We really hit the ground and we met people where they were and we heard from them. So this next phase is there really has 2 aims. The first is to invite people to see how their input was included in the draft policies of the plan, and then also to comment on the draft policies as well. So we have 10 chapters in the regional plan that all focus on a specific area, from transportation to climate resilience to natural resources. And we have formed these draft policies that serve as sort of the roadmap and the big general takeaways from those chapters. That'll inform the narrative and also the actions resulting in that plan. So we're going to have a public survey out. We're hoping folks can take that survey and react to the plans as well as our key takeaways and tell us how we did and if we're moving in the right direction. So that engagement period will run from next week, so the 9th of September through the end of November. So we'll be holding 5 pop-up events during this period. We'll be visiting all 27 town select boards, and we'll be hosting 2 hybrid feedback sessions. Folks can attend in person at our office or online through Microsoft Teams. So all this information is available on our website, which is rutlandrpc.org/plan2026. And really, we want to encourage folks to provide their invaluable feedback, because it was really great to hear from everybody and all their concerns and opportunities in the first round. And hopefully in this second round, it will be as informative and as valuable as the first round. And
I know you were pleased with the response that you got, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. These weren't folks just taking a quick survey. They really told us a lot about their thoughts. And what was really interesting to see, Brian, was, how much consensus there actually is in Rutland County in the region, in that people generally want, development within our downtowns and village areas. They generally want to conserve our scenic, agricultural, and natural resources. They want more trade jobs. They need more housing across the spectrum. want more high-paying wage jobs as well, and more energy efficiency, better resiliency to climate impacts like flooding. A lot of folks felt like we weren't prepared for that. And they didn't feel like our economy was very diverse. So those are areas that really help inform us where to go with this plan and set that guide to really shape an equitable, healthy, and resilient region for the next 8 years. So we're hoping we can get it right. And most importantly is offering these opportunities for folks to give their feedback. And so we can have a transparent process. So when we get to the end of our adoption period, when we get to 2026, everyone feels good about it, and we'll have a smooth sail to adoption. So that's our task. Ultimately, the Board of Commissioners, which represents all 27 towns in the region, they're the ones that adopt this plan, and they have representation of those towns. So we feel good about that. Obviously, the big piece to this, as you know, is Act 181. So that has serious implications for the Regional Planning Commission, how we operate, and our regional plan. So for folks online that don't know, Act 181 was the big Act 250 reform. Can't even remember the name of the bill. Something about biodiversity and community resilience, I believe. So 3 major pieces to that changed. One was the state designation program. Those are our downtowns and village centers. Those consolidated into basically 2 designations, villages and downtowns, along with some add-ons like a neighborhood development area. It changes Act 250 jurisdiction, where it was, based on criteria and land size before. Now it is location-based. It's based on 4 different tiers, from the highest tier being Tier 1A, which will be our dense downtowns that are ripe for development, hopefully being fully exempt from Act 250, all the way down to Tier 3, which is critical natural resources, where development is completely prohibited. Where that meets the road for regional planning commissions is our regional future land use map. So we as a region get to decide, not based on nothing. It has to be based on legitimate, planning principle and data and spatial analysis. But essentially, we have the task, as we always have, of mapping where we want to grow and where we want to conserve. In the past, our regional plan maps have all been different across the state. Our criteria has all been different, our land use areas, everything, symbology. This bill makes us all standardize that approach. So that standard means the symbology, the areas, everything. So what we're going to be tasked with starting in 2025 is updating our regional future land use map with this new criteria to reflect areas that we believe are suitable for growth and areas that are not. And that map is going to inform those tiers I talked about within Act 250. It's a huge task. We have a great future land use map, but it lacks definition in its current form. We have soft lines, and in this map, it will have to be hard, definitive lines between the areas. Luckily, we have great municipal future land use maps and zoning maps to help inform this. But, I think everyone in the region can probably name off where they think those areas are going to be, Rutland City and Brandon and Fairhaven. So that'll be part of this regional plan update. The timing works great, but it will be a big lift for us, and I can't imagine we will see no changes to Act 181 between now and 2026.
Oh, I have a feeling we'll be looking at it again.
Indeed, not that you didn't spend enough time on it last session.
Yeah.
Brian, what do you think is going to be coming around this session? It seems last year was so intense and so many big bills came out. Yeah. Are you hearing anything, seeing anything? Well,
let's take our first break, and when we come back, I'll be glad to talk about that. And again, it's kind of a projection at this point. It's a prediction, if you will. Mm-hmm. And you never know what's going to happen. But Yeah, so we're talking to Devon Neary from the Rutland Regional Planning Commission, and we've talked a little bit about a grant that the area has received from the federal government, $1.25 million, to help with training for some trade jobs in the area. And then we began to talk a little bit about the act that was passed last year and does have some very positive impacts on places like the city of Rutland. There will be other places where, in a sense, it will be harder to develop than it is now. But that's all coming across in the plan that Devon's talking about. So let's take our first break here on Catamount Community Connection, and we will be right back. We're back on Catamount Community Connection. I'm Brian Collamore, your host for our 1-hour show each and every Sunday. And by the way, I have been receiving comments from people every now and then. We happened to be at a sine wave the other day right at the corner of, right by Main Street Park, and someone rolled the window down and said, "Hey, I hear your show every Sunday and I love it." So thank you for listening, and it makes me feel better that there are people that tune it in every week, and hopefully they're getting some valuable information. So we're talking to Devon Neary this week from the Regional Planning Commission. And before we took the break, Devon was wondering what might be happening legislatively in the next, session, if you will, the next biennium. First, I have to really caution myself, if I'm not reelected, then it'll be a whole different world. So I don't know. I mean, again, you sort of, that's your first thing. And then the second piece of that will be the committee assignments. There are two ways to do that. In the Senate, we have this really strange committee called the Committee on Committees, which consists of the lieutenant governor, the pro tem, and a member elected at large from the Senate body. So those three people make the decision about which committee each of the senators or committees, because we sit on two committees in the Senate because there's so few of us. So they'll be deciding which committees you get assigned to. In the House, it's different. The Speaker of the House, the only person that decides, and at the moment it's a female, so she will make decisions about what legislators do in terms of their work. Because there's 150 of them, they're only on one committee. So they have a tendency to be able to dive a little more deeply into a particular issue because they're at it all day, every day. In the Senate, we have a morning committee and an afternoon committee. So with that said, I would like to be back on agriculture in the morning and institutions, which is a money committee of sorts, in the afternoon. But we'll see. And we have, as is true with each biennium, a whole different complexion. We've lost three of our most senior members in the Senate. One of them passed away, Dick Sears from Bennington. Bobby Starr, after about 40 years, decided he wanted to retire. And Jane Kitchell, who was the chair of the Appropriations Committee, also decided not to run for re-election. So there will be a lot of institutional knowledge that will be lacking next year in the Senate. In terms of maybe issues, here's what I could possibly see coming up. We have a budget every year. The governor has his proposed budget, which we get told about in the early part of the session. And then the two appropriations committees in the House and the Senate work on it. And then there's eventually always disagreement between the two versions of that budget. And then they hammer out a compromise. And usually we vote on that as the last bill of the session. We did see a dramatic increase in that last year. Some of it was driven by programs that were not in existence the year before. So we'll have to see how the budget comes out. There will be, I think, some further Act 250 revisions, whether Act 181 is trimmed back a bit or, it's funny, once you see how things work, sometimes you go, oh, well, we didn't think that was going to happen. So our job is then to, quote, fix it with an amendment or some sort of modification. But I don't think we're through with Act 250. I think there'll be some more revisions to that coming up. Housing continues to be, I don't know if it's the number one issue, but it's certainly in the top three. Unless we get a handle on that, and let's be honest, we've already spent hundreds of millions of dollars trying to figure out how best to do that. there's an obvious intersection between 250, the Act 250, and housing. If you make it more difficult to build housing, you can't solve the problem. You have to have a streamlined process, which I think Act 181 does do in some areas. In order to do that, we've talked with the mayor before about the potential of the hotel being built in downtown Rutland, which will have both rooms to rent, so there'll be permanent housing, and also it'll be a hotel, so there'll be nightly visitors coming and going.
Yeah, I believe 26 units.
Yeah. So that's going to be huge. Public safety is another one that I keep hearing about. We did make some inroads into that last year. I felt that made some sense. I was absolutely astonished to learn at one point, if you looked out your window, Devon Neary, and saw someone in your vehicle rummaging around but hadn't done anything else yet, that was not a crime.
If the vehicle was unlocked.
Until this year. Even if you broke in, I think. If you didn't have a no trespassing sign on the car, it technically was not a violation of law. So that surprised us, and we fixed that. That is now, you can't do that, folks. Okay, so don't be rummaging around somebody else's vehicle. And we did some work on the conditions of release. So if somebody appears before a judge on a continuing sort of basis with retail theft or just mischief in general, they have to take that history of that individual into account when they issue conditions of release. It's now mandatory. It wasn't before. So I think that will also help. And forgive me, but people talk about this catch and release thing all the time, where someone gets caught and before the ink's dried on the paper, they're back out on the street again. And we do need to fix that. We really, really do. And then we had some movement on governance last year, regional governance. We're a state that does not organize with respect to counties. We do in some ways, but not in terms of governing. So it's not like Florida, where each of the counties determine how they're going to do their work. We don't do that. And I don't know whether we should or we shouldn't. I think there's a study that's been proposed, and I think that came out of Government Operations Committee. So we'll have to take a look at that. There are people that feel that we should be run like a county by county thing, and I don't know.
Yeah, we see it a lot in our work at the Regional Planning Commission, and there are a lot of models out there. County government isn't the only model. A couple of things that are big takeaways from what I understand is we miss out on certain funding opportunities that goes directly to counties. We have found a great workaround with ARPA, and the federal government was really interested in getting us that money, so they did a waiver and made it happen. But in a lot of cases, it doesn't happen. For instance, energy efficiency community development block grants, another mouthful for you folks, sorry. But those go to county governments. So 2 years ago, last year, there was another opportunity through that funding, and it went to our county court system. So luckily in Rutland County, we've got a great relationship. So they called the Regional Planning Commission and said, hey, there's this allotment of money. We do not feel comfortable administering it. We know you work in energy. Would you like this? So we were able to get that from our county court system, which was awesome. So we lose out on some county money, which is tough. The other thing, and I think most importantly from our perspective at the Regional Planning Commission, is the efficiencies gained from shared services and staffing. We see our smallest towns having to recreate the wheel and be self-sustaining when we're dividing them up by sort of arbitrary political boundaries, and they could be sharing those services or staffing with a town next to them. Most of the time we hear about town administrators, small towns not able to fund a full-time position by any means. They may have no full-time positions other than it's usually a road foreman and a town clerk. But they still have the same amount of paperwork and regulatory administrative practices as any other town, including, Rutland City. They need that support, but they cannot afford to bring on somebody full-time, and it's really hard to hire anybody part-time, as you know. So there could be efficiency gain there. the model that I tend to like the most, and I think would fit Vermont the best, is the Council on Governments. That it's called a COG. It's utilized in Connecticut, who got rid of county governance in I think the 1960s or 50s, and they are able to do a lot of very interesting regionalized services and staffing that really enhance the quality of life while saving a ton of money. So we'll see where it goes. We're excited at the RPC because that's our intersection. We always kind of say the phrase, in the absence of county government, regional planning commissions are the ones, making the connection between towns and the state and the feds. So we'll see where it goes,
Oftentimes I hear with respect to emergency services, whether it's law enforcement, ambulance, fire, that because of the geography of the state, it really sometimes doesn't make any sense to go county by county in terms of police departments or fire. It just doesn't make any sense. Where you correctly, it's an artificial boundary, and if there are two towns that are next to each other, but they're both in a separate county, sometimes it doesn't make any sense to have separate, emergency services. So I don't know. I think there's another group that's beginning to look at that problem, and it is a problem.
Yeah.
We talked earlier about the CUDs, the Communication Union Districts, and there are still, for some reason, places on the western side of Rutland County where cell service is very spotty, and where, in essence, if I'm remembering correctly, when you call 911 sometimes, it goes actually to New York State, and they're the ones that send out the ambulance or the police response. So it's just one of those facts of life that we have mountains in Vermont, and it kind of screws things up sometimes.
Yeah, we have some serious physical limitations that honestly have been dictating development in Vermont since our conception. So, yeah, these are real issues we've got to deal with, and most often we're just seeing the impacts felt greatest in our smallest, ruralist communities, and it is an equity issue for them. They don't get police coverage. They have very little emergency services, so that's important to sustain their quality of life, and we'd like to help them find a way to make that happen.
People may not be aware, and I don't know the right dates, okay, but I'm just going to say for about 100 years, when Vermont was first established as a state, there was an eastern and a western division. And the governor of the state, and this was by agreement, would be on the western side one time and then the eastern side, and they would flip it back and forth because of the mountains. And it wasn't until much later on that practice stopped. But for a long time, we were divided east and west, depending on what side of the mountain you were on. And it's really strange now to think about that.
It really does. Yeah, it kind of makes sense in some ways, but very odd in others. Yeah.
I mean, the eastern part of the state, because people from that area, the New Hampshire, that was in a way developed first. That was like where people were at first. And then the western side, which was the New York grants, began to develop a little bit later on. Now you've got, of course, got that northwest part of Vermont, with including Chittenden County and Franklin County, that are population drivers for the rest of us.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you before, and I know it's still early, and you've got a second phase of this plan to get more input for which to get more input. And but were there any early sort of surprises to you from what you received back from people that filled out the survey? Anything that kind of made you scratch your head? Wow, I never thought of that.
I think honestly the surprise was the consensus.
Okay.
I thought there would be a little bit more division. I grew up in Rutland County. It's a very diverse county. If you go corner to corner, it's quite a different feel. But I was shocked that, and we track this town by town. We wanted to hit certain percentage metrics in every single community, and we were able to do that because we didn't want to just hear from Rutland City. Right. We didn't just want to hear from Poultney, So I think that was the most shocking thing. And ultimately, folks, I think the biggest split is in the solutions to those problems. And what the direction of the future of Rutland County looks like in the region. But, that's the part that we love. We want to get into the solutions. We want to figure it out and try some different things, because in some ways the status quo hasn't been working to the great success. In some ways it has. So, if we can find that sort of sweet spot and create a vision that everyone can get behind, I think that is the starting point that we're looking for.
Often you'll hear people say, and I know that we're probably never going to be able to pull this off, so we'll talk about transportation a little bit. Air, planes, or air and planes, same thing, trains, and then vehicles. So at one point, and it was really political, when the eastern part of the state was able to get Interstate 91 and then later 89, it was because that's where the senators who lived there
in the 60s,
put their pressure and their support. That's why they're on that side of the. I mean, it just as easily could have been on the western side, really.
Yeah, it could have been 22A, Route 7, Route 4. I mean, US 4, Super 4, as we call it, is such an anomaly to have a split highway that's not an interstate, but it is an interstate. So, it's an odd thing. I mean, the transportation, it's funny because we might lack interstates, but we are defined as the crossroads of Vermont, where Route 4 and Route 7 meet, and it shows. It's a highly trafficked area, and we also have the most productive section of rail line in the state of Vermont, thanks to OMIA. But still, there's still quite that network of transportation facilities within our region that's quite unique. But it certainly could be more efficient. Yeah.
And I've had people ask me, hey, what's the likelihood that we could get an interstate on the western side? And I said
0.0. Yeah.
You're absolutely dreaming. The rights of way, the construction that would be needed, it's not going to happen. We're going to have to deal with Route 7. That's our north-south corridor.
Yeah, the rights of way just within the redevelopment of Route 7 and 22A with our region has been very difficult. 22A, they've been working on for a long time. This next section from Fairhaven to Bridport, they want to widen the shoulders, make it much safer. We've had that string of really nasty, fatal accidents in West Haven. But, we're looking a ways out. And, same thing, Pittsford. We were supposed to see a redevelopment of the village in Pittsford now, and now it's looking 8 to 10 years out. Yeah. So you're not wrong. Some of these rules are making it very difficult to get big construction jobs done that we desperately need.
And I'm glad you mentioned OMIA and the rail. I think that's great. The third piece of that, of course, is air traffic. And I am of the opinion that we have a great airport in Rutland. I mean, I use that a lot to go from Rutland into Logan. That's where Cape Air flies. And then from there, you can go anywhere. And it's cheap, and it is just so easy to do.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have Cape Air and the essential air service that's subsidized by the federal government. One kind of new note around our airport and the state airports is the Agency of Transportation had been working on pre-permitting hangar development for our state airports for the last several years with a consultant. They've invested a lot of time and money, and that effort is nearly complete. I believe for Rutland, this means pre-permitting for several new hangars in 2 different areas, which for folks who don't know, beyond the essential air service and Cape Air, there's a lot of traffic from hobbyists and private airplanes. And a lot of times these private airplanes and jets are flying in, dropping their passengers, and because of lack of hangar space, they're moving on to Glens Falls or Lebanon. So, that's missed opportunity, whether it's, selling avgas or getting people to stay in Rutland County. I think this is a huge opportunity. Personally, I hope they're listening. I want to court Beta Technologies down here. I think it would be great for them to have a facility in Rutland. I know they are looking at Plattsburgh, and they might have even established something there, which makes sense because of the proximity. But for that next leg, come to Rutland. We already have a beta charger at the Rutland Airport. That could be a huge boon for the area. And just across the street there at the Airport Industrial Park, I believe Cedar has the Chamber and Economic Development of the Rutland region has received money to expand their either water or wastewater to develop more in that area. So it's exciting. I think Rutland Airport is one of the biggest assets we have that's kind of undervalued and underutilized. So hopefully through this development, we can make it a little bit better.
And I think with the anticipated growth at Killington, we're going to even have more of a reason to see a greater development of that. I mean, that's going to be a big change for folks. It really is.
Yeah, in some ways could be the biggest development project in Vermont's history. Yeah. We're hoping it's changed for the better, but there's a lot of apprehension out there about what this could mean for Rutland City and Killington. But we're hopeful, and especially with the news of the sale of the resort being to local folks with a real personal interest in the success of that resort, I think we're primed for something great here.
We're talking to Devon Neary from the Rutland Regional Planning Commission. We need to take our second break, and we will be back in just a moment here on Catamount Community Connection. We are back on Catamount Community Connection, and we're talking with Devon Neary this week from the Regional Planning Commission. I'm Brian Collamore. Thank you all for listening. And our show brought to you by the Rutland County Agricultural Society, which has brought you the Vermont State Fair at Rutland since 1846. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the 178th fair just concluded last month was a smashing success. And it was just great. I was down there, I think, every day but one. And I got my maple candy. I still have one box left. And I love that stuff. So I bought a lot of boxes. But anyway, the attendance was up, and it was great. No incidents. It was just what you want your Vermont State Fair to be. So thank you to them, and we're looking forward to 179 coming up next August. So let's talk again with Devon about another program. Talk to us about it. Is it the MERP program that's coming up?
MERP. Yep.
MERP.
Another fun acronym for the listeners today. So this is the Municipal Energy Resilience Program, which is administering ARPA funding through buildings and general services, aimed at really improving energy efficiency and reducing costs while revitalizing our municipal buildings. What informed this program was the Efficiency Vermont Energy Burden Report, which is a report produced every 4 or 5 years, I believe, that looks at the costs of energy in towns, who's spending more of their money on energy in these communities. So in the Rutland region, we had 9 communities that were considered high energy burden, from Rutland City all the way down to Mount Tabor. So we had a pretty wide swath of communities. They are positioned now after accessing energy assessments. They had a professional company come in and assess all these buildings, and towns were allowed to pick, which buildings do you want to assess. Some towns have a lot, others like Rutland City, or Rutland City has a lot, others have only a few. But as you know, you go around our towns in the Rutland region, most of the time the town offices are some of the oldest buildings and some of the biggest buildings. And it's costing these towns a lot of money. So these energy assessments came through, and they looked at the building, they looked at, the costs, the systems, and they prescribe an update, a retrofit to renovate the space. And it could be anything from heat pumps to new windows to solar to the physical wrap of the building. And it's not small dimes here. We're talking some of our communities are eligible for nearly $500,000 to invest in their buildings. So we're really excited that a third of our towns are going to access this money. And they're really excited that not only are they going to reduce their energy burdens, but they're going to reduce their costs. And in some cases, a lot of these buildings are being used for not just your town office, In Wallingford, it's your meeting house, In Fairhaven, they're renovating it to be kind of a third space community center. It can be anything. It can be the Historical Society, the Planning Commission, so many great uses. And I think more towns are thinking differently about how to use these public spaces, because people today, they want, third places outside the home that they can get together with folks. Usually it's around recreation, but in Vermont, we need indoor recreation half the year. It's cold and snowy, so yep. And not everybody skis. We are excited about it, and to bring that level of money to the region is always just a huge focus of ours to really reduce costs.
I'm assuming schools are not included in that group.
No, schools were not included in that group. They, received a lot of special funding through ARPA dollars and actually received ARPA money directly. It had a different name, Ezra or something like that. Either way, they did get a fair amount of money. Certainly, it's not helping their budgets right now, as many schools, had their budgets voted down, eventually to be voted in. But, hopefully a program like this would be extended to the schools as well.
Okay. We've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to give you a chance again to bring people up to date about the second phase of the plan, and that's going to be going out. Let's see, this show will air on the 8th of September. And so from then until, I think you said the end of November, there's another way to interact, right?
Yes. So Brian's referring to the Rutland Regional Plan, and this is what we're calling Plan 2026, with the hope to adopt the plan sometime in mid-2026. So we held one phase of public engagement. Hopefully a lot of you heard about it and even participated in it. That happened earlier this spring. We called it our Learn and Assess phase, and that really helped inform the first draft of the plan. Now we're in phase 2, which we're calling Report Back. And we're reporting back because we ultimately want to invite you to see how that feedback was incorporated into the plan in the draft policies. So we want to know two things. Did we hear you right, and did we get it right in synthesizing the feedback that received in the first phase? And then 2, are the draft policies the right direction for this plan? We have 10 chapters ranging from transportation to energy, natural resources, and down the line. And they set a course. Our vision for this plan is a guide that shapes a resilient, equitable, and healthy region. And we want to make sure that these policies, these draft policies, will get us there, and that everybody feels good about them. So they're not going to look at the full plan yet. That'll be our next phase, which will be phase 3 in spring of 2025, when we have the full draft of the plan ready for public view, and folks can really dive into it and see it in its full capacity. So what we're doing now is we'll have a public survey that'll be on our website. Hopefully you'll see a lot of our flyers throughout the region on town offices and local destinations. You can scan a QR code. Survey shouldn't take more than 10 minutes tops. And while you're scanning that survey, you can also see a full list of our events and other ways to engage with us, which will be on our website, rutlandrpc.org/plan 2026. Look for our flyers around the region. Look on Facebook, Front Porch Forum, press releases. We're going to try to get the word out as best we can. But ultimately, your feedback, the listeners here already has made a difference. And now we want it, again, to refine this Plan 2026.
And I'm sure we will have you back on this show sometime in the coming months, too. I assume that there'll be sort of little different tweaks for each of the 27 towns. You're not going to say, okay, this is the plan for everybody. And it's funny that there'll probably be almost experts at each of the 27. I don't know how many folks you have that'll be willing to look at each town and see how things are going. But
yeah, so one thing that we're really intentional about in this plan is highlighting all 27 towns in this plan and making it a plan that is flexible and locally led. So it is a plan for Rutland City and Mount Tabor. It can relate to everybody in the region, no matter what size or what the situation is in those towns. So yeah, we're excited. This is a huge opportunity, not only for the Regional Planning Commission, but the whole region to really chart a course, because this plan really has two purposes. It's that vision, it's that roadmap for the future, and it's also a regulatory document. It's used in Act 250 proceedings to say where we want development and where we don't, and how we want that development to look. Also with Section 248 proceedings, which is our energy siting law. This plan is used to say where that energy should be sited, how it should be sited, and how it should factor in things like our scenic resources and housing and all the rest. So it's an important document, and sometimes these big plans are hard to convey to folks. What does it mean to you? Well, day to day, it may not seem like much, but in the future of Rutland County, it means a lot. It means a lot. So hopefully it's a plan everybody can really get behind. But most importantly, to do that, we need to hear from folks.
Okay. Devon Neary, thank you so much for being on with us this week. And you stay well. We'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, Brian, thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing you up at Montpelier again this year.
Okay. It's a date. And we will see all of you next week on Catamount Community Connection.